You're listening to BQN. Assimilate the audio.
Welcome to CINEMAZ, a film discussion and review podcast on BQN. We're here to showcase the films you probably missed, but should definitely check out. From independent and obscure to art house and absurd, each episode will gather, perhaps cocktail in hand, to discuss it all. I'm your host, Mark White, and with me today, of course, is Matthew Jennings, and also Chrissie and Jason from History with the Szilagyis podcast.
Hello.
Hi, guys.
Hello.
Thanks for having us on.
Welcome.
Hello.
Yeah, this is, this has become quite the phenomenon. This is probably the most talked about podcast event of the summer, the biggest event of BQN's history. We have History with the Szilagyis and CINEMAZ coming together, and it's going to be this explosive event. And I'm so glad that you guys are here. So thank you.
We're creating our own cinematic universe.
There you go.
We're
going to have a Marvels crossover soon. It's going to be an Avengers style crossover. It's going to be pretty epic.
I am so stoked for that.
Yeah. I don't know if it'll be as epic as those old scientists, but it'll be close.
Yes.
Well, I didn't have time to grab the feedback on last week's episode, but I don't think it matters because I know that the last episode we dropped, the Batman episode, has rocketed up to be one of the top rated podcasts that we've put out, and people love it. And we have gotten a lot of comments and feedback on it. People are very stoked. So in general, thank you all for tuning in and really, eating it up like cake. Well, this episode is my pick this week, and I want to do something special. Yeah, this film we are covering is Oppenheimer. If you haven't heard of it, it's a new film. It came out this summer. It's a 2023.
Alongside Barbie.
Yeah. It's a 2023 epic biographical thriller written and directed by Christopher Nolan, based on the 2005 biography American Prometheus by Kai Bird and Martin Sherwin. The film chronicles the career of American theoretical physicist J. Robert Oppenheimer. The film stars Cillian Murphy, Emily Blunt, Matt Damon, Robert Downey Jr., Florence Pugh, and featuring Josh Hartnett, Casey Affleck, Rami Malek, and Kenneth Branagh. So, again, I like reiterating how stacked the cast is. Wow. It's great.
I mean, Kenneth Branagh is in it for like less than 5 minutes, and it's Kenneth Branagh. So yeah.
It was such, it was like a cast of cameos, and it was so cool. But it was very much, when I watched it, was like an ensemble piece in a theater. If that just makes any sense. Like you have some major actors that are playing smaller roles, and actors that you haven't seen in a while playing bigger roles. It seemed like it was very much a theater company piece, and I really enjoyed that part of it.
Yeah.
So why did I pick the film? Well, Chris Nolan. I mean, I got to. I love his filmmaking. I've enjoyed pretty much all of his movies, varying degrees, obviously. Not everything I think is a knock out of the park, but he definitely puts his spin on cinema that I enjoy, and I find it refreshing. It's interesting. It's thought-provoking. Yeah, I think it's great. And then, I heard about, the story, and it was going to be a true story, and it's like a biopic, and I was like, oh, he's doing a biopic. This is, really unique for him. And I don't know, I got stoked. And then Chrissie and Jason, you guys were doing History of the Szilagyis. You guys did 4 episodes on it?
Yeah, 3 or 4. I'd have to go back and look because
I think it was
his life.
It was 4. Yeah.
Yeah, it is because I did the first part of his life up to the Manhattan Project, and then we did 2 for the Manhattan Project, and then 1 for the later part of his life. Yeah.
Oh, okay, so you were just covering his entire life, not just the making of the. Oh, okay.
No, because his early life is fun and interesting, and maybe fun isn't the right word. It's interesting. And there is a funny point in his life I'm going to talk about later that I really wish had been in the movie. But yeah, and then the end of his life, the work he did then is just not what you would have expected from the man who created the atomic bomb. But
Interesting. Okay.
So I want to ask, and you can take turns. Why did everybody else want to watch this?
I'll pop in. I think history, especially now, is very important because books are now being banned, and because we have things like critical race theory being taken out of schools. When you have a piece of work like this that is telling this kind of story, I think it's all the more important to support it and show that there is an audience and a hunger for these stories. And I mean, we'll get into this later, but the details as well. I have some questions about the details and what was in the film and what was fabricated or amped up for the sake of cinema and what wasn't. But yeah, at the end of the day, these stories are very necessary in a time when we're trying to censor our America, especially our own history and our own ugliness. In a time where we're trying to censor some of those things, it's all the more important to go support stuff like this. So that's why I went to see it.
Good reasons. I think a lot of people went to see this because they thought they were going to see, like, oh, yay, America bombing Japan, World War II, rah, rah, rah. And no, not even close.
No.
Not even close.
No. I wanted to see it because I've studied World War II for pretty much all of my life.
Wow.
I had a grandfather who was in the Merchant Marine in the Second World War, so he was running convoys across the Atlantic. And so it had always kind of stuck with me that this was something to read about, to understand. And the more you study it, the more you realize that there's always this impression in movies and in documentaries that, the people who make these monumental decisions like this never have any doubts about what they develop or what they do. And with Oppenheimer, the real man, he was genuinely shaken by what had been developed. And it's that idea that, he has given humanity something that could be either incredibly beneficial or it could be something that could destroy everything. And once, it was successfully tested, he doesn't go into kind of it's going to sound odd, but a Judeo-Christian Abrahamic kind of discussion of what this can be. He goes back to Hinduism, totally different, something that most Americans at the time would not have been familiar with. He says, and now I've become death, destroyer of worlds. Basically talking about the fact that man has now transgressed from just being on the planet to being able to end the planet, being able to end all life.
Yeah. When I heard about this movie and I read a bit about it, what it hit in my head was that I had been wanting to read American Prometheus for a long time. And so I was like, oh, now I have to go see the movie. And I got so sucked into that book. Oh, let me tell you, even for people, if you don't normally read history, finish listening to this podcast and then pick up a copy of this, and it reads, they're excellent authors. It reads almost like a novel, the way they put it together. I mean, it's a page turner, which you don't usually get with books of history.
Well, that's awesome.
Yeah. And so I got really sucked in. And then there was the thing of like, okay, so what are they going to put from the book that's in the movie, and what are they going to take out, and how are they going to change it? And that's something I've been playing with in my head for a long time in my life. And of course, I'm interested in the period too. And not like Jay, but the social, I'm a little more in the social history thing.
Yeah. There's a moment in the movie after the bomb has been successfully tested, and it's Oppenheimer. It is, I can't remember the name of Matt Damon's character.
Leslie Groves.
And it's just all the figureheads, the think tanks, from every division behind this. They're all speaking about places that the bomb could spread to. I think cultural significance of places that they could destroy, all these different things. And I think you had said something about it earlier, as it wasn't so much these people were going to be so excited that they had this power in their hands to do this. there was a moral dilemma. Was that scene, was that something that actually happened? Do you know? Was that a genuine meeting that they had of, well, what are we going to hit here? What's the possibility of this? Should we be careful for this? Is that?
Yes.
Wow.
That was a meeting and in fact, the Secretary of War, whose name escapes me at the moment, says that he took Kyoto off the list because he honeymooned there and it was pretty and he didn't want to see it destroyed. That happened. That's true. This movie, in terms of like historical accuracy, with some of the weird little things that you would not expect them to bother with being historically accurate, they do. It's fantastic.
Wow.
I appreciate the authenticity and the transparency. I really do, especially now. I genuinely appreciate that. Thank you for answering that. Yeah.
He did that with Interstellar too, with really trying to nail like what the optics and stuff would be for the black hole, for instance. And people literally have written science papers about it, about how accurate that was. So I think that's really cool. But I do want to, before we continue, because I forgot this at the top, interject a little levity here. What are we all drinking today? So I'll start off. As our listeners know, I like to have themes. And so today is Fireball whiskey and ginger beer.
Oh my gosh.
So
that actually sounds good. Cinnamon and ginger,
yeah. A little Fireball action with some ginger beer. What about you guys? What's everybody else drinking?
So everyone, listeners, you know that I'm very classy.
7-Eleven again?
No, this was the AM/PM by the gas station, and I purchased a lovely Mike's Harder cranberry lemonade, the year 2023,
excellent vintage.
Yeah,
that is a good year for
my. It's a very good year. So it's cost a pretty penny, but for this podcast, I figured I had to. Yeah.
I can't top that. We're going to dinner later. My sister and her husband are coming up for the long weekend, and I don't know who's driving, so we have not indulged yet. But I did put my cherry liquid IV in my cup that says "History. Don't make me repeat myself." So I'm on brand.
Oh, where did you get that?
Barnes and Noble.
Brilliant.
And
your turn.
I was say I'm drinking, a bit of water out of my Hydra glass. So, doing a little bit of Marvel, a little bit of history thrown in there.
Well, that's World War II related.
Exactly. They did infiltrate S.H.I.E.L.D. Yeah.
Well, I want to kick it to the history with the Szilagyi's team for the next topic. Take it away, I guess.
All right. Well, actually, I'm going to continue the last topic for just a moment, because, of course, one of the pivotal scenes in this movie is when he's making martinis, right? And he was famous for his martinis. Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess within his circle, but he was well known for his martinis. I want to read the description, and this is from the Washington Post article that came out when the movie came out, specifically about his martinis. They did an article. He says, it says this: Oppenheimer's martinis are often described as strong, with one witness to his ministrations complaining that he used only a droplet of vermouth. If we take the dash stipulated in the Los Alamos recipe to be about 1/4 of an ounce, the Oppie martini has an eye-popping 16-to-1 ratio of gin to vermouth. The man was a functioning alcoholic. The Oxford Companion to Spirits, that was my interjection. The Oxford Companion to Spirits and Cocktails notes that by 1910, the usual ratio was 2-to-1. But by World War II, the standard became 3-to-1, with 4 and 5-to-1 also common. The reference book notes that President Franklin D. Roosevelt frequently went as far as 7-to-1. Modern versions vary too, but our cocktail columnist notes that drinkers should adjust the split as they like, recommending a classic 5-to-1 for those who are just beginning to explore their martini preferences.
Oh my Lord.
And apparently he had a special kind of salt that he rimmed, or sugar that he rimmed it with. He rimmed it with something special.
Well, Matt and I like to rim it with something special too.
No comment.
If you're not doing that, then what are you really doing? But also,
honey and lime juice. That's what it was. Sorry,
that sounds good.
That sounds good. It also
I mean,
sounds like one of those would knock you on the floor.
well, I mean, with what you were saying, as the years went on, especially as we get to World War II, the ratio divide, if I'm using the right word, gets bigger. It just makes, I mean, you're going through this trauma of sorts, and it makes me think about the pandemic, because I think that,
Oh yeah.
I don't know if there was this, I could be pulling this out of thin air, but I think people just picked up drinking a lot more during, I know I did.
Yes.
To your point, it makes total sense how, as time went on, especially during World War II, that ratio is going to change. It's very interesting.
Mm-hmm. So if I liked martinis, I would have made up one of those to drink. But
Much.
gin just tastes like
Oh,
pine trees smell. So I'm not good with that. No.
That's a
oh,
very good description. I agree.
I gotta make you guys a gin and tonic. I make a good gin and tonic, and they're tasty.
I don't doubt that you do, and I'd be happy to try it, but a very small one because I don't think I'd like it. But
And if you don't want
I'll
to
try
drink it, if you don't want to finish,
it.
it's fine. I'll make sure it finds a good home.
Isn't that a great thing about alcoholic drinks? You take a sip, you don't like it, you can share it because it
Yeah.
sterilizes itself.
Yeah. It's not like licking a piece of popcorn. It's like, nah. Here, do you want
Yeah.
this?
No.
I hate this. It is revolting. More, please.
Please.
Oh no.
Yes.
Star
Oh,
Trek
yes.
reference. How far into the conversation are we?
Sorry.
Do not apologize for that.
There'll be at least
Do
one.
not. I almost had to add, and I'll add it now, when you were talking about all the people that were in the film, we forgot about Jack Quaid as Richard Feynman.
He's in it for a while, and I was like, I was very happy to see him.
All right. So right, historical accuracy. I already mentioned a few things. Let's see here. You want to talk about here? One of my points I have here, Harry Truman really was that much of an asshole. You want to talk about that?
Yes.
Oh my
yes.
Lord.
Oh God.
Oh yeah.
Yes, he was. He was.
That's a real line.
Yeah, he was not well liked by the opposition, and he was not really liked by his own party. But okay, so Franklin Roosevelt had been elected president 4 times, which was unprecedented. So he would have served, 16 years. He didn't make it past the first year of his 4th term, but he ended up bringing in Harry Truman as his running mate for the 4th one. And they had not really had much of a chance to interact with each other. Roosevelt had an idea of how he wanted the world laid out when everything was said and done, when the Second World War was over. And since Truman was not part of this inner circle to start with, he was pretty much kind of left on his own. And that's not excusing the fact that he was an ass. But he really, when he brought in Oppenheimer to congratulate him for developing the bomb, and Oppenheimer was talking about, okay, we need to open up to the Soviets and the rest of the world, and that way there's not going to be this arms race later on, and the number of people who had been killed and continued to die from the radiation sickness. Oppenheimer said, I feel like I have blood on my hands, and Truman did take the handkerchief out of his pocket and said, wipe your hands. And then he said not to bring him back. He didn't want to see him again, because he, just like kind of the line in the movie, you weren't the one who decided to drop the bomb. It was me. And they'll remember it was me and not you. Because Oppenheimer really, as the bomb was getting closer and closer to being finished and Germany collapses and surrenders, Germany was really the target for that.
Yeah.
Because of the Axis powers, Germany, Italy, and Japan, Germany was the most dangerous. It had the biggest industry in terms of being able to produce war materials. It had one of the biggest scientific communities in the world. And it had pretty much all of the resources of Europe for a while that it could use. And the Germans were pushing to have an atomic bomb developed. The British actually did send a commando raid into Norway with free Norwegians who had fled after the country had been overrun. And they ended up destroying the heavy water research plant that the Germans were hoping to use to develop the atomic bomb. So that each side went kind of in different directions for the research, but the raid definitely helped push the Germans back quite a bit.
Did they use slave labor to work at that heavy water plant? I saw it in one of my history shows that I watch.
Mhm.
Yeah, the Germans, Nazis, Germans, it's kind of hard to divide them at that point in time. But some of the things that they would do is they would either use concentration camp prisoners to work as slave laborers with the V-2 rockets to build them, or to build planes. So they're working side by side with actual free Germans or French or wherever they're working on at the time. Another group that they did was what they would call guest workers, which was the German government would send a quota of how many workers they wanted occupied countries to send to Germany to work in their factories. And then in theory, the money that they would have earned working for those companies would have been given to their families or paid off against the war indemnity that the occupied country owed the Germans. So there's, there's a lot of intermingled, I would say, persecution and death involved in these.
Yeah, and slavery is not the wrong word to use.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah.
It's a very familiar tactic, very familiar.
And they would work to death.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the heavy water plant, I think they were saying that the temperatures and stuff in there, were, well over 100 degrees and things.
My God.
And they would just keep going. And if they fell, they were shot. So you got to keep going to stay alive, And they were packed in like sardines in their little concrete bunker buildings.
And then this, not even starvation rations.
Yeah.
This is why we have to support this stuff. This is why history is important. I mean, the parallels. I mean, I'm thinking about enslaved Africans as well. Just even some of the words, like people being packed in like sardines.
Yeah.
Black people being packed in like sardines on slave ships. The conditions, working under the hot sun. It's just it's so cyclical.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm going off on it.
Yeah. No, that's I can tangent with you. If I may recommend for people, the book to read on that recently is Gerald Horne's
Apocalypse of Colonialism.
Yeah. He talks about in that how the apocalypse of settler colonialism, that's what it is. How the concepts of white and black were created and how variable they were in those years, and it all depended on whether or not they needed more enslaved people or more people who were running what was enslaving the people who were enslaving. And interestingly, because I can bring this back to Oppenheimer, I swear, this is when Jews got to be white, because there were a lot of Jewish people who were in the Caribbean and they were slaveholding, and there needed to be that differentiation. So he talks about that in the book and lots of other things too. It's a good book.
Wow.
Yeah. So.
Oh my gosh.
And I don't get me started on that. Okay. Maybe sometime we'll have to maybe have a series on like roots or something, and I can go off on.
I mean, it's all, it's just, again, just hearing some of these key words, it's just the cycle over and over again.
Humans are going to human. And one of the things we love to do is hurt each other.
Humans are going to human. I love that so much.
Put that on a t-shirt.
Oh my, I'm so
we do need to put that on. I say it in my classes all the time. So I should put it on a t-shirt. Yeah.
Yes, you should.
Right. Okay. Oh, so bringing it back to Oppenheimer. Right. Oppenheimer, one of the things they don't talk about in the movie, which is it's not a glaring omission, but it does, when you know it, it does color how you understand how he's looking at the world. And it's because he was raised as a secular Jew. Okay. So like they were not religious, neither his mother or his father. They're both, his mother was first generation. Her parents had come over. His father was an immigrant himself. It's mentioned briefly. He was a shoe salesman. He just very briefly mentions it in the movie. And they were completely secular, but they belonged to this group. He grew up in New York, and they belonged to this group, and I have it written down here, sorry, the Ethical Culture Society. And the Ethical Culture Society is basically just like it sounds. It is taking the ideas and ethics and philosophies of not just Judaism. It was primarily secular Jewish people who comprised it, at least at the beginning, but just living that life as opposed to just attending services about it, I guess is how I like to put it.
Okay.
And I usually end up applying that to people who claim to be Christian, but take it where you will.
Please, yes, please do. Please do.
Yeah. And so, of course, Ethical Culture Society was very pro-socialism in that era, before it became it was always a boogeyman in the United States because it was introduced during the Reconstruction period, and it was used as a way to scare people about allowing formerly enslaved people to vote, because of course they're going to vote for the government to give them things, right? So that's why socialism is understood completely incorrectly in the United States. Again, that's a whole other topic. Read Heather Cox Richardson's How the South Won the Civil War. That one, she explains it beautifully.
Oh, the very title gives me chills.
Yeah. And with the book cover, it says North, but then it's got South written over it. So good. Yeah. So going into this whole thing, he is okay with doing this when it's been being put against Germany. Okay. And it's not that he's okay with, he always had trouble with the idea of the amount of death this was going to produce, but he was weighing it against what he knew was going on with the Holocaust. Okay.
Right.
And he had family, they lost family. His family had family members that were left in Europe that were killed. He, as soon as he heard about what was going on, people say nobody knew about what was going on. People knew about what was going on. People in the States knew about what was going on because there were collections taken. Ethical Culture Society did one of them. They collected money to get Jews out of Europe, out of Germany particularly, but out of Europe. And he donated to that from the get-go. At one point, he was giving 10% of his salary to one of those organizations. Oh, wow. So his mentality going into it against the Germans and then having it pushed over to the Japanese, where there's a completely different idea of what's going on and a completely different reason for doing it. So there's all that added ethical issues that go with that he was able to kind of step away from when it was the Holocaust and the people who perpetrated the Holocaust, which is not to say that there were not terrible things that happened that the Japanese did. The Americans did some pretty horrible things too. Everybody does horrible things in war. But in the way that we Americans grossly and terribly perfected the slave system, the Nazis grossly and terribly perfected the genocide system. If there can be said such a thing, I guess.
Yeah, and the human testing and using them as lab experiments and things like that. So much of that happening in World War II in the Germans.
Yeah, I mean, is it Kohler that was the one that produced the ovens? No, it wasn't Kohler.
There were a lot of different ones.
There's some really famous, I can't for the life of me think of it. Krups.
Yeah.
Okay, who makes high-end electronics and kitchen gadgets and stuff,
and also weapons and
but they made a lot of money building gas chambers and ovens.
Oh my god.
Yeah. Bear aspirin, I don't think Bear aspirin was involved in that, but the reason that Bear aspirin exists in the United States is because the ownership of it was part of the treaty negotiations that had to be given over to us. It was a German company.
Oh wow.
Now aspirin had nothing to do with the Holocaust as far as I know. Correct me if I'm wrong. It's one of those weird little facts that always pops into my head with that stuff.
I had no clue.
And of course IBM. I mean, IBM's the big one that everybody knows.
Oh yeah.
No?
I didn't know that one. Please spill that tea.
Do you want to talk about that or shall I?
Yeah.
IBM was an American company and still is an American company.
Yeah.
But it was even back then, companies are international, so you have different branches and different territories, and IBM helped to come up with the numbering system for the concentration camps. One of the things that is truly horrible about it is, I mean, all of it is horrible, but for the survivors, if you ever saw their tattoos, it starts out usually with a
Right.
letter. The letter designates what country they're from, and the
Mm.
number is where they fall in line with that. And so each country in Europe had its own letter to go with it. And not everyone was recorded because the way that it worked in the concentration camps and the death camps was that you'd have trainloads of people come in and there would be an immediate selection. Okay, the elderly, children,
Right.
most women were immediately sent to the gas chambers and killed the first day they were there. Younger men or men who were professionals, okay, they knew leatherworking, or they were doctors, or they were dentists, or they had some skill that was going to help this camp
Right.
function, because a lot of those death camps, there's also work camps attached to them where they're creating things for the German army or the German military. But what would happen is the people who would be spared the initial selection, they're the ones who are tattooed. And then they're no longer referred to by name, they're referred to by their number, because it's a way to dehumanize them. And so your oldest groups inside some of these death camps would be Poles, Greeks. And so one of the things that, you kind of see there is that there's so many interconnections between different businesses, different governments, before the start of World War II, and they continue through. Henry Ford, he was making money from the United States government because, of course, the Ford factories here were converted over to wartime production, but he was being licensed by the Germans to help Maybach build engines and trucks for the Germans.
He had to get smacked upside the head by the Roosevelt administration.
Yeah, basically, it was his grandson. His grandson, right, who ends up taking over the business. His son and grandson basically are given reign of the business in the United States because they've kind of pushed the older one to the side.
Who was a super fan of Hitler.
One of the big lies that, Hitler and Nazi propaganda put out was that all the Bolsheviks were Jewish, which was not true. There were some members practiced Judaism early on. A lot of the leaders of what would have been the Bolshevik Party, they were going to be priests. They were actually Christian, Eastern Orthodox, but they were Russian Orthodox, but they were Christian, and they just never finished the seminary school before they went revolutionary. But there was the fear that one of the things that prevented a lot of European Jews from escaping before the Holocaust was the fact that there was a fear that they were a fifth element. They were a fifth column. They were going to be a group that you would bring into your country, and you didn't know where their loyalty lay. Is it with just their religious group, or is it with larger society? And so for people like Oppenheimer and, the Jewish scientists, they're brought over. Well, Oppenheimer was already here, but there were a number of scientists who end up coming over before the war, when Hitler purged the universities of Jewish professors. But while the people who are viewed as valuable by the government are being allowed to come in to the United States or Canada or Britain or Australia, there are thousands of others who are denied. Perfect example of that would be Otto Frank, Anne Frank's father. The Diary of Anne Frank. She and her mother, father, sisters, they had fled, and they were basically sitting as refugees inside the Netherlands, waiting for acceptance of their visa so that they could go from the Netherlands to the United States and seek, sanctuary. And Otto Frank wrote to every politician in the United States he could think of in order to see if he could get the process of their passport being bumped up, and it never happened. And unfortunately, the Germans came in and occupied the Netherlands, where the Franks were hiding. They end up going into hiding for years, and then they're captured. And Otto Frank is the only one out of that family who survives.
God.
So when you think about these things, when Oppenheimer meets Isidore Rabi, Okay.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
you know, what was the first thing? He sits down across from him in the train, and he, first of all, I love, he gives him part of it, eat something, eat
I
something. You got to
love
eat something.
that
And
that's
I
kept
love that.
throughout. Yeah,
I
me too.
love that. Food is one of my love languages.
Mm,
So
mhm,
I'm
mhm.
constantly giving people food. Um, it's not usually just oranges, but hey, you know, whatever. Um, oranges are good. But he makes some comment like, you know, you don't see a lot of people like us out here. And it's very much, I said earlier about how they don't really deal with his upbringing in the Ethical Culture Society and as a secular Jew, but you do understand that he is Jewish, and you do understand that he has that connection to what's going on and why
Right.
that's important to him.
Yeah. Just again, the importance of telling these stories and supporting these stories, and in the way in which they're told, in terms of detail and authenticity and honesty. Just, again, with people like Ron DeSantis that want to censor, our history, that want to
Yeah.
ban books. This stuff is, we have to show, I think, especially with, cinema, which is able to reach such a wide audience. We have to show that there is a hunger for these stories and support these stories, because people like Ron DeSantis might try to take over the country and and put a stop to movies like that. Those are the stakes. Someone like that gets in office, we might not have an Oppenheimer movie.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
reality.
It's
Or
crazy,
it'd be propaganda.
Right. That's
and
all I wanted to say.
If you go into history, you have to do a lot of book reviews. Every class you take, book reviews. And one thing that it stuck in my mind so well. Okay, when you're writing a book review, or in this case, a movie review, don't criticize the author for what you would have done. Okay. Because they're not doing what you would have done. They're doing what they're doing. Now, I bring that up because there were people who complained that there was no Japanese point of view in this. And the Japanese point of view is an important one when we are talking about the atomic bomb.
Right.
Obviously. Okay. There's no, it seems like it's too obvious that it to even need saying, but it does. But at the same time, that's not what this movie was. And that story does need to be told. I think George Takei is one of the best tellers of the story of the Japanese Americans in the United States. There's no question there.
Yeah.
But yeah, that story does need to be told. But I just, since we're talking about Oppenheimer and getting into these issues of how history is told.
Right.
The people that were saying that, or at least when I encountered it, the people that were saying that the Japanese experience was erased from Oppenheimer. And the thing is it wasn't there in the first place. This is a story about him. By all means, I would love to see a Christopher Nolan picture about what happened with Japan during the war and in after the war, after the dropping of the bombs and all of that. But that's just not what this picture was.
Yeah,
and
I hear what you're
saying,
so
there were a number of people that made those comments, and maybe this wasn't the place to address it, but I thought of it, so there it is.
No, you're right.
The one big inaccuracy that shows up: he did not take the calculations to Einstein to figure out whether or not they were going to light the atmosphere on fire. He took those to a guy he had already been working with, whose name was Arthur Compton, who kind of just gets left out of this because he's tangential to the story they're telling. But so that was a big incorrect point, but I think one that can be forgiven, to my mind. So that, and almost all of the dialogue in the hearing is taken directly from the transcripts. So when you're talking about historical accuracy, you really can't get better than that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Honestly, that could be a whole, just that scene, those scenes, that could be a whole theater piece.
Yeah.
That's a whole show.
You could do that in a small theater with
a black box
stage.
Theater, just a small space. That would be, okay. Sorry,
well, speaking of theater piece, now it's time for my favorite segment, Director's Cut, where we go through some of the scenes in the film and reenact them without any at all practice. Qu'est-ce que c'est le fuck? There we go.
You say what the fuck?
Yes.
And now we're pleased to bring you our feature presentation.
So,
what is? I always forget the French word for fuck. Oh, anyway.
it was mentioned by one of our dear listeners that we don't mention what set up the scene enough. So I want to bring it up now.
That's a very good point.
The first scene we're gonna do is from the beginning. See, I had a hard time getting this script first of all because it's in the theater still. So I probably shouldn't legally have this script, but I have the script, and it's giant. And rather than go through the entire
I know nothing.
giant script, I picked stuff from the beginning and then I picked stuff from the very end and mashed it together. So sorry, Chris Nolan, you probably won't hear this, which is great. We fly under the radar.
Unless you want to become a patron of BQN at patreon.com/BQN and get one of those higher tiers, please.
Stop, no.
Tomorrow we will see Christopher Nolan's name pop up.
No. Yeah, we're going to see it in a lawsuit letter.
Cease and desist.
This is fair use.
This first
We're commenting.
This first scene is the Oppenheimer touring his office for the first time with Strauss. Is it Strauss? Straws.
It is Strauss, but he made a point of pronouncing it straws because he wanted to sound American and Southern. So
ew.
He would correct people. Oh wow, yeah.
Oh God, I can't.
Mm-hmm.
Oppenheimer is touring his office with straws. So there is straws and Oppenheimer in this scene. I don't care. I don't need to be in it. If you guys want to do it, whatevs. What's everybody feel like?
I'll be straws.
I'll be Oppenheimer. I can do that.
Perfect.
Action.
This would be your office. I'm told he's there most afternoons. I always wondered why you didn't involve him in the Manhattan Project. The greatest scientific mind of our time.
Of his time, Einstein published his theory of relativity more than 40 years ago, but he never embraced the quantum world it revealed.
God doesn't play dice.
Precisely. Have you ever thought of studying physics formally?
I had offers, but I choose to sell shoes.
Louis Strauss, once a lonely shoe salesman?
No, just shoe salesman. I'll introduce you.
Oh, no need. I've known him for years.
Cut.
Yeah, that was a good scene. I think it set up their dynamic really well.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
And I have to make a personal correction. I said earlier that Oppenheimer's father sold shoes. It wasn't Oppenheimer's father that sold shoes. He sold cloth.
That is all right.
It's not too far off.
We have the second scene where Oppenheimer's up and running. He has his classroom and he's teaching. At the start of the movie, he has like a couple of curious students, but then through the film, he gains momentum, and people are hearing about him and checking him out. So at this point, his classroom is full, and he is giving a lecture to his students. So I kind of want to do Oppenheimer in this one. Do we have a Snyder?
I could be Snyder.
Oh, yay. Okay. All right. Action. I guess I did that for me.
Action.
Consider a star, a vast furnace of burning in outer space, fire pushing outwards against its own gravity, balanced. But if the furnace cools, gravity starts winning. It contracts.
Density increases.
Increasing gravity.
Increasing density. A vicious cycle until what's the limit here?
I don't know. See where the math takes us. I guarantee it's somewhere no one has been before.
Me?
Your math's better than mine.
Cut.
That I liked that line. I thought that was a cool line.
He was notoriously bad at the lab stuff, and he did not like doing the math. He liked doing the thinking.
Interesting.
Actually, they show that in the movie right at the beginning.
I mean, they totally they have those. They do a lot of showing there. I mean, the first scene when he's in class, and then the other scene where I guess
the atom split. That was before the war. The Germans.
Oh, Okay,
It was a
yeah.
German physicist who split the atom first. Yeah.
Right. And then it's like one of his students confirms it and figures out how to do it. Isn't that what happens? At least in the
Mhm.
movie anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. They nod to that many times.
Scene 3 is a party discussion about quantum mechanics, and this is the first time that Oppenheimer meets Kitty, who would she goes on to be his wife. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And they have a kid together, sort of.
2.
They have 2 kids.
Two
Yeah.
Oh, they have 2?
Yeah.
Okay.
You're not wrong to have forgotten about the second. the poor
I
woman
think they
was
did too.
well forgotten. I mean,
Yeah.
not well forgotten about. She was forgotten about for the most part. The son lived an okay life. The daughter kind of got ignored, and she was a linguist, and she wanted to work for the UN, but they wouldn't hire her because of her father's record.
Oh, Lord.
And she ended up committing suicide
Oh my
shortly after that. I wouldn't
God.
say just because of
Yeah.
it, but yeah.
Oh my God.
All right. Well, the party discussion. Who wants to
We'll
who
do
wants
this.
We'll do
to
this one.
play in the sandbox?
And
We'll do, yeah.
you
we'll
do
do-
Oppenheimer?
All right.
Okay.
action,
You're a biologist?
Somehow I graduated a housewife. Can you explain quantum mechanics to me? It seems baffling.
It is. This glass, this drink, our bodies are mostly empty space. Groupings of tiny energy waves bound together.
By what?
Forces of attraction strong enough to convince us that matter is solid and stop my body passing through yours. You're married to Dr. Harrison?
Not very.
Well, there's someone that I
Does she feel the same way?
sometimes, not often enough. I'm going to New Mexico to my ranch with friends. You should come. I met with your husband.
Yes, you did, because you know it won't make a bit of difference.
cut,
That is a good scene. I poked you because that was it. He grabs her hand when he says that about the not passing through you. So,
Oh, it was
but yeah, that is-
kind of sexy. Who knew math would be so sexy?
That's
Besides Amy Nelson.
yeah.
She's like officially turned on by this entire podcast right now.
Right.
Associate producer.
No comment. What was I going to say? Right. This very well encapsulates their relationship. He was her 4th husband.
Oh
my.
And she was very disillusioned with life by that point. And I think at one point they really did love each other. I mean, they got married because she got pregnant. She divorced and they got married because she got pregnant. But she was quite a character.
Well, the final scene I have here is the conclusion of the film. It's also the conclusion of the lake scene that we saw at the very beginning. So I thought it'd be a cool bookend for this, director's cut segment.
I see what you did there.
Yeah. Even though this scene, I guess, according to Chrissie, didn't happen.
No. This I can't speak to this. I'm talking about when he goes and asks about the equations, whether or not they're going to light the atmosphere on fire.
Oh,
that's the one that didn't happen. This likely, I mean, I can't speak to the words, but they did interact a great deal. At the Institute. Yeah.
Well, I kind of want to be stupid and try to do an Einstein accent. Who wants to play with me?
I say go for it. This is your day. Go for the Einstein. I'll be your Oppenheimer.
I have no idea how to do that accent because it's so, I don't know. I was trying it earlier. And it was coming out kind of German, but also kind of Scottish. It was really bad.
There's no judgment. This is a free space. You're free to fail as my actor.
Remember what Jimmy Doohan said, all of the best engineers are Scottish. That's why Scotty was Scottish and not Canadian.
Oh, that's right. Oh, no.
Not that Einstein was an engineer by any means, but
action,
Robert, the man of the moment. You once had a reception at Berkeley, gave me an award. You all believed I'd lost the ability to understand what you started, so that the award wasn't for me. It was for all of you. Now it's your turn to deal with the consequences of your achievements. And one day, when they've punished you enough, they'll serve you salmon and potato salad and make speeches, give you a medal, pat you on the back and tell you all is forgiven. Just remember, it won't be for you. It will be for them.
Albert, when I came to you with those calculations, we were worried that we'd start a chain reaction that would destroy the entire world.
I remember it well. What of it?
I believe we did.
Cut.
Yay!
Yeah, that was good.
Yes.
You know who you reminded me of there? Worf's father. You get a little good Sergei was saying, sure.
I have all the specs and diagrams at home.
Yes.
There you go.
Oh my god. Oh, I love being stupid on this podcast.
Honestly, Mark, like you were with some tweaks, genuinely, you sounded good. We just gotta with some tweakage.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah, you started out real strong, and then, like you said, you leaned a little Scottish, and then came back. So it was good. Well, while we're talking about scenes, this isn't something to act out by any means, but it's funny because after we saw the movie, like this was the scene that stuck with me the most. When he's getting deposed, he's not being deposed. What did I call it? The hearing. When he's in the hearing, and his wife's sitting behind him, and he's talking about his affair with Jean Tatlock, and of course, Kitty knew about this. Okay, she wasn't entirely faithful for their marriage either, so I think there was an understanding there. But as he's testifying about it, and you see him, and he's sitting naked in the chair in the hotel room, and then the camera comes around and he's nude in front of everybody, and then camera comes around again and she's sitting on top of him staring at Kitty. That scene, just describing it pulls the hair on my arms. That was so well done because it just laid bare how exposed he felt. And in his discussion of how she committed suicide, if you read the book, he very much felt that was his fault, to the point where he almost felt like he had driven her to it. And so in that scene, when you see her sticking her head in the bath and there's a hand that pushes her down at one point.
Oh my God. Oh,
that's his feeling as though he did it.
Oh my God.
And so that scene was just so,
that makes so much sense now.
Everybody kept mentioning the hand, and I don't even remember seeing it.
I remember the hand, and initially I thought that she had been killed by, I don't know, CIA, FBI, for having some kind of knowledge she wasn't supposed to have access to. But that makes so much more sense and is so powerful.
And I didn't catch the hand the first time. It was the second time, because as I was talking about this with people, but it's easy to miss because you see the same scene 2 or 3 times and the hand's only there once.
Right.
And so it's, and he's wearing a black glove, so it kind of blends in. Yeah.
Wow.
So that was a, whoever put that together, fantastic.
Yeah. Well done. Well done.
Fellow BQN host Thad Hait over with me on Infinite Diversity there. When he went to go see this, he had a couple of guys who were sitting a row or two behind him who were complaining the whole time about it being communist propaganda, which I find utterly hilarious and ironic. Obviously, they weren't paying attention to what was going on at all.
That's strange.
Yeah, and he saw it in a suburb of DC, I think, or close to. So you can see where there might be, there's that political culture depending on where you're at.
It's very interesting. I mean, the theater, if I can interject here,
no, go ahead, please.
The theater that I went to see the movie, and I normally go to see all my matinees there. I live in Orange County, which is a very conservative part of California, and I will go to see a movie and I see men wearing shirts with like Black American flags on them, rifles on them, 1776 on their shirts, and all kinds of. So I just say that to, kind of, build on top of your point there. When you get to, some of these audiences that are watching these films, depending on the location that you're in, you're gonna get stuff like that.
Yeah, and I think that's very much they were expecting the bomb the Japanese, World War II was the greatest thing ever,
Yeah.
The Eddie Izzard bit, I love the smell of Europe in the morning. Do you know her stuff?
So I've only seen.
Sorry, there.
Hi.
Sorry.
Hello, there's a beautiful cat, listeners. There's a beautiful cat
Yes,
that
yes.
The
decided to
Szilagyi
make a
household
cameo.
is crawling with pussy.
Oh, I was just gonna say I've seen one of his comedic pieces. I haven't seen all of them. And I randomly saw Her. I'm so sorry.
It's recent.
And
Yeah.
I randomly saw her in New York. Randomly.
Oh.
Just like
Cool.
past. She was wearing like a beautiful
Oh,
like,
like
coat.
not saw like in passing, not saw like at a theater.
Oh no, just in
Went to go
passing.
see.
She
Oh,
was like
that's
going to, I don't know, like a
awesome.
bar. She was in Greenwich Village and she was wearing like this
So
beautiful black trench
cool.
coat. And that's all. That's
If,
my
Oh,
that's
Eddie.
if
my
Eddie
Eddie
Izzard is
story.
going to be in New York, I expect Greenwich Village. That's just
Yeah.
yeah, definitely. Definitely. And I say that with love, and it makes perfect sense to me.
Yes.
Yeah. Watch Dressed to Kill and Glorious are the
Yes,
two
Dressed
where
to
you get a
Kill.
lot of good history jokes. Oh my God, yeah.
I'll-
And I
I'll
think
check
I
it
Love
out.
the Smell of Europe in the Morning is from Dressed to Kill, but I'm not 100% on that.
All right, I'll double
Oh.
back. I saw Dressed to Kill. I'll
Mhm.
have to check out the other one. Thank you.
Well, moving on to rewrites. So in this section of the podcast, we sort of talk about things that if we were in charge in any way of making this film, what would we alter to make it more to our tastes? For me, I feel like the movie got so good as it was going. You know what I mean? It kept picking up steam and picking up steam and getting really good. But the beginning part was so confusing.
Hmm.
And it wasn't just because I was high. I was genuinely confused. I was like, what is happening here? What time period is it?
It jumps around.
It jumps around a lot, but just at the beginning, really. I mean, and then when the jumps happen later, it sort of makes more sense
Right.
storytelling wise. But at the beginning, it's just chaotic and frantic. And all of the
Mhm.
sounds and the random, I guess, imagery that's popping up. Yeah, I don't know. It just it kind of threw me off where I was like, I don't know what's happening here. And if I was making it, I probably would make it a little slightly more linear. That way, when I started the movie, I would know what's happening and start
Mhm.
to understand it more as it went along. I don't know, but that's me.
I'll pop on in and say, I say this all the time. I don't want to kink shame, but so the scenes with Florence Pugh and Cillian Murphy, the sex scenes, the intimate scenes, I think overall in Hollywood, there's still this lack of balance between male nudity and
Mhm.
female nudity that just it stares me in the face all the time. And I'm not saying that just because I'm gay and I appreciate nude men. It's just the bias is still so apparent.
Yeah.
I think Game of Thrones started to get it right. The ratio is still off.
Yes, but the one screen where you're just seeing that kid's penis, and that's all that's on screen. I think we can take quantity over.
Over.
Sorry, that was a really bad joke, and I didn't form
No,
it well.
It's just, with Florence, we have those intimate scenes and her breasts are exposed.
Mhm.
And like in the first scene, Cillian's got like his shirt on and his pants on. And I'm like, I'm not saying that because I want to see another actor's genitalia or the tush. I'm just saying that if we are going to do this and keep doing this, we have to start having the other species be just as exposed as well.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Also, along with the nudity, I'm not a prude. I appreciate nudity if it informs the piece, if it makes
Mhm.
sense in the story. I think by all
Mhm.
means put it in there. There's a beautiful scene with Cillian Murphy and Florence Pugh. I think they've just had sex and they're in the hotel room, and both of them are sitting in, I guess, the hotel chairs a certain way, and it's almost like they're
Mhm.
mirroring each other, and the light's hitting them a certain way, and that's beautiful.
Mhm.
That's
And that's
different.
with the scene I was talking about earlier, because it goes
Yes.
back and forth. Yeah.
Right. And that's beautiful. But again, when I see her with her breast exposed and I see Cillian Murphy just like with like a side exposure of his nude
Mhm.
body, it's just the bias just sticks out to me. And that's the thing that I would change. Maybe that's just the thing I would change in Hollywood overall.
He's got his legs crossed even.
Ugh. Who has sex with their legs crossed?
Well, I meant when they're sitting in the chair.
Oh,
I just want to mention that I saw Red, White, and Royal Blue on Amazon recently. It was
Been meaning to watch
suggested
that.
because it was the #1 most streamed movie on Amazon, and it was a queer film, and I was like,
Mhm.
"What? Are you kidding me? I'll check it out." And so Andy and I sat and were watching it. But
Mhm.
this relates to what Matt was talking about because it was so bizarrely shot that these men are having sex through the entire film, and literally like they're in bed and the blanket's pulled up above their nipples. You don't even see nipple. Okay. Like it's weird. You'd see more on NBC these days than you saw in that film. There's a scene where they're making love and it's a behind shot, right? And instead of seeing like a lower back or an upper back, you see like a mid back shot, which you don't even know what part of the body it is. And then you see a hand and another hand on top of the other hand, and then the scene's kind of over. And I'm like, excuse? Like I said, in a film that's about two gay men having a healthy relationship, and it is a very healthy relationship, like they love each other, it's very tender, like it's a great love story. I commend them on writing a great love story.
Yeah.
Filming it in a way like that was so bizarre, especially coming from the queer community. If you're making this for the queer community, listen, we've seen nude bodies. We're not ashamed of it.
We've experienced it.
And this is Amazon. We're not this isn't going to be on PBS at 4:00 in the afternoon.
They could show more if it was on PBS.
Yeah, probably.
It's so clinical.
It goes back to what you were saying, Matt. It's like, what is happening with Hollywood where they feel like men, no, you have to cover up men all of the time and show as little as possible, but a woman, she can walk down the street completely naked with her hoo-ha hanging out, and it's totally fine. We'll just put it in this commercial for Pepsi.
As long as she's not breastfeeding.
Oh, yes, but yeah, she can't be breastfeeding. Cover up in a burqa if she's breastfeeding.
I know one series that did get it right with male nudity when I saw Queer as Folk on Showtime.
I gotta imagine, yeah.
I will say, I mean, even though some of those sex scenes were unnecessary, but I will it's because it's oh God. But
it's Showtime.
Honestly, it was Showtime. And I mean, to tie into Game of Thrones and mentioning Game of Thrones as well, between Game of Thrones and Queer as Folk was like the only other time that I had seen male genitalia exposed. This was like Queer as Folk and then Game of Thrones.
All right. Chrissy and Jason, do you guys have any rewrites?
I mentioned earlier I was going to tell you about a funny story from his life. He was into science very early. So his grandfather gave him this box of geological samples, and they were all labeled and everything. And that sent him out looking at rocks like you do when you're a kid, except he was Robert Oppenheimer. So he started writing to local geologists about what he was seeing. And they lived in New York, and like he found these weird rocks in Central Park and wrote to the New York Geological Society. So they invited him to join, not knowing that they were corresponding with a 12-year-old. And when they invited him to join, they invited him to give a paper. And he did. And they were all very surprised that this 12-year-old walks up and gives a paper. He didn't want to. He begged his father to go and explain to them or call them and tell them what was going on. And his father refused to, supposedly because he thought it would be absolutely hilarious, which is a moment in his life that both tells you a lot about his mind and also tells you a lot about his upbringing and what his father was like. But I wanted to see that scene because it was just so, it fits, but I totally understand why they couldn't include it. You would have had to add a lot of other stuff. So
it could be in a deleted scene. We don't have the Blu-ray, the DVD, the digital download. It could be.
I would not complain about a 4.5-hour cut of this, like Dance with Wolves or what do you call what's his Batman Superman.
That was good.
Yeah,
that was good. I would have seen that.
Anything you would have added in?
I think they did actually a really good job. There's not much that I would rewrite with that. I think it would be a little bit more interesting if we could have seen some more of the interactions with, Strauss, and where he felt that he was so put down by Oppenheimer and the other scientists. Because I did like how they framed his, in theory, confirmation hearing, and then went through the story of what would happen to Oppenheimer But it would have been, to a degree, nice to have seen a little bit more of Oppenheimer and his interactions.
Specifically dealing with straws. Yeah.
Because
we do only see them a couple times. It's in the office and it's around that table where they're
and then they're
yeah.
walking past each other by the lake shore.
Yeah, that is interesting for two characters that were so tied together through the whole film. They had very little screen time together.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's psychological papers that could be written. They may already have been, about how you have somebody who's perfectly confident in themselves, or at least can present themselves as confident. Oppenheimer, like so many of us, dealt with imposter syndrome, but portrays confidence as opposed to somebody who is very much not confident in his position and not confident that he can do these things that he wants to do. And so he feels the need to manipulate the situation instead to make sure that it'll happen, instead of just relying on his own ability.
Well, bonus trivia that's not actually in the trivia section, which we'll get to in a little bit, but Chris Nolan had suggested to Robert Downey Jr. to prepare for the role that he watched Amadeus, because his character in Oppenheimer was similar to the Salieri character in Amadeus, who happened to exist at the same time as Amadeus, so he often gets overshadowed in history. Moving on to standouts, to end on a positive note here. What are some things that we really loved about the film that we want to mention? I loved the fact that the way that it was shot, as far as some of it was in black and white and some of it was in color, to sort of let the audience know, or the viewer know, what perspective the film is at this point. I just thought that was a really cool way to play with it, and I love that Chris Nolan always does that. He plays around with the medium of cinema so much because he adores it, and it really comes across. So I thought that was cool.
I'll hop in. So I appreciated, I think, out of what I've seen of Christopher Nolan's work, I've seen the Dark Knight trilogy, I've seen Inception, I've seen, did he do Tenet, or did he produce that?
He did Tenet.
He did Tenet as well?
Yeah. You didn't see Interstellar?
And I saw Interstellar as well.
Hope so.
Mark's like, give me the death glare. Oh,
girl, you better.
No, I did. So out of the pieces that I've seen, I would say that this is, dare I say, I think a more mature piece for Christopher Nolan, in terms of him trying to do some different things with being a bit more abstract in his storytelling. The storytelling is not linear. There are certain things in this film that are very theatrical that I could see being put up on a stage. Again, the scene that you and I were talking about, the scene with Cillian Murphy and Florence Pugh in the hotel room, and then she's on top of him when he's in the office or in the conference room in the hearing. That's very much, that's so theatrical. And I appreciate, for a filmmaker that tends to do linear storytelling and more traditional storytelling, I appreciate taking the step outside of that to do something different and to really push a moment with imagery, with sound as well. I mean, the sounds of the booms of the bomb that continually play throughout the film, which just to me was like Oppenheimer's inner monologue constantly. This is what is working on him all the time, and that kind of informs you where he is throughout the whole movie. So I really appreciated that. This was different for Christopher Nolan. I appreciated, to me, him stepping outside of what he normally does, stepping outside of his comfort zone.
And the stomping of the feet in that towards the end.
Oh, the scene when he's given the speech and then he walks back and he steps in the body is just
God.
Yeah.
I'm glad they included that, because it showed how it haunted him for the rest of his life.
Yeah.
I appreciated, again, the idea that it was a more mature film to it. I mean, there was not really any action scenes like you would have seen in the Dark Knight trilogy or Inception or anything else. It was character driven and dialogue driven. And I think to a degree, some people were expecting it to be this kind of jingoistic, rah, 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 we were the ones who developed the bomb first. but it shows the fact that the people who were in the process of developing it, they had moral qualms about it throughout the entire process, and then even afterwards. And just to a degree, the shock, again, the scene where they're in the auditorium and he's giving
Yeah.
a speech about, it would have been, we missed Germany, but we got Japan instead. But when he's staring at the light that's hitting him in the face, and then he's looking into the crowd and he's seeing skeletons, he's seeing the skin
Flesh
coming off of them, and realizing that we have done this to one group, but what's that necessary? We've done this to another nation. What's to stop this from happening to us?
Mm-hmm.
Again, that idea that bringing it back to the title of the biography, American Prometheus. Prometheus was a god who was punished for giving mankind fire, forever tortured. And that was Oppenheimer until he died.
Mm.
Knowing that he helped develop a weapon that could end everything, and hoping that the people who are the ones in control of it, not necessarily the scientists who developed it, but the politicians and the military, you hope that they have a cool head when it comes to whether they use it or not.
And the idea that he wanted to share, as scientists are apt to share things irrelevant of politics.
Yeah.
And that's what he wanted to do, and that would have been the right thing to do. Of course, politics get in the way.
Well,
Yeah.
Trivia. Time for trivia.
Yeah.
Well, Cillian Murphy was the first member of the cast to join, signing on to portray Oppenheimer in October, while the main cast signed on between November 2021 and April 2022. And Nolan says he had the cover photo from American Prometheus set up so he could stare at it and figure out who he should cast to look like Oppie. So that's kind of cool.
It is Nolan's first film not to be distributed by Warner Brothers Pictures domestically or internationally since Memento, as well as his first film to receive an R rating since Insomnia.
Oh, this is cool. In order for the black and white sections of the movie to be shot in the same quality, Kodak had to develop the first ever black and white IMAX film stock. Oh,
That's
I love
really
that.
Cool.
That's
And
cool.
there's a wonderful connection with that, because one of the reasons they knew how far the radiation got after the Trinity test was because of damaged Kodak film that was showing up in New York and on the East Coast.
Wow.
In a Collider interview that there was no CGI shots in the film, which is really impressive.
Yeah, love
Especially
that.
today.
He shot a film about the atomic bomb and didn't use any CGI. So cool.
It's crazy and wonderful. It'll hold up better.
The casting of Josh Hartnett marks an interesting full circle moment, as Hartnett was one of the 3 finalists to play Batman in Chris Nolan's Batman Begins in 2005, but respectfully declined the role, later going on to say he regretted the decision as he is a huge admirer of Nolan's work as a filmmaker and wished to build a creative relationship with him. The film hit theaters July 21st, which happens to be Hartnett's birthday. So that's cool.
It all comes full circle. And also, I haven't seen Josh in a long time. He looks good.
Oh, yeah.
I just gotta say, Mr. Hartnett, you look good. While in this film, Gary Oldman plays American President Harry S. Truman. Oldman previously played British Prime Minister Winston Churchill in Darkest Hour. He was so good in that. He disappeared in that part. I saw that movie. Oldman briefly played British Prime Minister Winston Churchill in Darkest Hour, also set during the same war. That movie competed against Christopher Nolan's Dunkirk during the 2018 awards season and earned Oldman a Best Actor Academy Award. Nolan was nominated for Best Director, a first in his career, and Best Picture with his wife.
Nolan became interested in doing a film on Oppenheimer after Robert Pattinson gave the book American Prometheus to him as a gift after Tenet wrapped production. American Prometheus is the biography of Oppenheimer. Nolan adapted to make this movie. Pattinson was offered a chance to be in the film, but says he was too busy with other projects. Well, I have a little better opinion of Robert Pattinson now.
Yeah.
He reads thick books and gives them his gifts.
He was probably too busy being Batman. He was getting ready to be the next Batman,
A
probably.
little bit, yeah.
During an interview with reporter David Martin on CBS Sunday Morning, director Christopher Nolan pointed out that the entire reel of IMAX film stock used for the production is 11 miles long and weighs 600 pounds.
Okay.
Wow.
I didn't know anybody still used film stock. I mean, I realize they've got to do film types. I guess I just assumed everything was digital.
No, not Nolan's movies.
That's cool.
always
That's
use
really
film.
cool.
Well, this is, speaking of Josh Hartnett, Josh Hartnett, this is his first World War II movie since starring in Pearl Harbor in 2001, which he co-starred with Matt Damon's best friend, Ben Affleck. And yeah, you remember Matt Damon was also in this movie as well.
Christopher Nolan claimed that the idea to cast Cillian Murphy came to him while looking at the book cover of J. Robert Oppenheimer on American Prometheus, the book upon which the film is based. Wanting to achieve J. Robert Oppenheimer's gaunt physique, Cillian Murphy lost weight and kept to a strict diet during filming.
He was skinny.
Yeah, he was.
They did some de-aging for him too at the beginning. A little bit. Well, they said they didn't use any CGI, so I believe that, but they had to de-age him somewhat because he looked like he did 15, 20 years ago at the start of the film. And that was cool.
Yeah.
Well, all right. So we have reached the final thoughts portion of the podcast. And usually we give out 1 to 5 something or others, and depending on the film. And I thought that for this, because this is featured so heavily in the film where they take the marbles that are representing enriched uranium. So I think we should give out marbles representing uranium isotopes.
Love it.
So, man, I think, I'm so predictable because I love so many films, and most of the ones we've seen I really love. So I'm going to keep up there with, I'll give 4.5 marbles of enriched uranium isotopes.
I would have to agree. I'd give it 4.5 as well. Yeah.
Well, my instinct is to give it 5, but now I feel like I'm giving it too much. With your 4.5s. Yeah, it's definitely a 5, and it's a 5 for, it's a 5 for how the movie is put together. It's a 5 for what it shows. It's a 5 for, I'll give it a 4.5 on historical accuracy, just to account for that. But yeah, fantastic.
Also 5 enriched uranium isotopes for me. I enjoyed the movie, though afterwards I was really quiet on the way home because it just made me think about how the world, we do so much in the process to develop things to destroy each other instead of protect each other or help each other. And it just really, it does. It's a movie that makes you think about it.
What shows are on BQN, you ask? Well, here's a rundown of some podcasts you might be interested in. All Good Things, a Star Trek Universe podcast covering all of Trek, hosted by Amy, Mark, Christos, and Kelvin. Bargain Bin Gamer, a YouTube show hosted by Davey, a self-proclaimed gamer who specializes in reviewing and showcasing affordable video games. If you're lost in the Delta Quadrant, check out The Captain's Couch, a Star Trek Voyager podcast hosted by Jeremiah sitting on Janeway's Ready Room couch. CINEMAZ, a film discussion and review podcast showcasing films you probably missed but should definitely check out, hosted by Mark, Matt, and Laz. Beam Aboard the Galaxy Class, a Star Trek Next Generation podcast covering all of TNG, hosted by Amy, Joe, Rhea, and Kevin. History with the Szilagyis, a snippet of historical events from around the world, hosted by Chrissie and Jason. For the newest Trek coverage, check out Infinite Diversity, hosted by Chrissie and Thad. Test your Trek knowledge with Trexperts Quiz, a Star Trek quiz show hosted and written by Davey. Union Federation, covering all things Star Trek and the Orville, which we all know is really a Star Trek show, hosted by Kyle, Kevin, Amy, and Haley. Spill the Tea with What's the Tea, Bev? A Trek current events and fan interview show hosted by Christos. And for our Patreon members, we have The Hive Mind, BQN's monthly roundtable discussion with hosts and listeners. It's Green, a cornucopia of topics hosted by Mark. And Amy's Math Moments, a quick look at math moments in Star Trek, hosted by Amy. We know you have a choice of podcasts to choose from, and we thank you for listening to BQN. Assimilate the audio.
All right. Well, next week, Laz's pick, and we're going to have Laz back, and also Shalimar. So they were away this week. They were actually attending a communist party meeting, their card holders. And so they weren't here this week.
They didn't invite us.
But they'll be back next week. And the film that Laz has chosen, we're going to be sliding into our spooky season here on CINEMAZ. And so throughout much of September and October, we'll be covering some of our favorite spooky movies. And the first up is The Mist.
Oh, The Mist. You know what? I'm going to have to watch that one with my mom. My mom loves that movie.
This film is a 2007 American science fiction horror film based on the 1980 novella The Mist by Stephen King, my old neighbor. The film was written and directed by Frank Darabont. I think that's how you pronounce his last name. I don't know. Somebody can correct me.
It's the internet. Someone will correct you no matter whether you're right or wrong.
Oh, absolutely. I don't know anything about the film. I'm going in blind. It's almost like I'm blinded by mist. Have you guys seen it? Has anybody else seen it?
I have.
I have not.
I swear I saw it a long time ago. So yes.
Or have I seen? Is that the one with James Purefoy, or is that another one with a misty foggy thing going on?
No, I'm thinking of The Fog. Never mind. I've never seen The Mist. I'm thinking
Fog,
Mist. I mean, it's close.
The one where they're stuck in the grocery store.
Yes.
That's The Mist.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I have seen this.
I saw the trailer. I never watched it though. But I remember them being stuck in the grocery store. All right, I'm excited.
Yeah, there you go.
Yes. The movie is better than the TV series. I will say that.
Oh, that's right. There's a TV series too. Well, all right. We swapped. Oh, you were supposed to do that. Whatever.
It's okay.
How about
swapping?
you?
It's good. Flip flop. Reverse.
Are you verse? You're verse. Okay. So
we would listeners. Anyway, we would love to hear what you thought of today's episode and hope you'll join in our Facebook group, the BQN Collective, to continue our discussion there. You can also tweet your thoughts at CinemazPod and let us know if you'd like to recommend a film. Please follow the network on Twitter, BlueSky, and Instagram at BQN Podcasts.
So, Matt, where can people find you when you're not being interrogated while nude?
Oh my God. Well, I don't want to kink shame.
There it is.
Where can you find me? You can find me on Instagram at 1701BLERD. Check out my web series. You can also find me on BlueSky, because I'm trying to get in with all the young people now. Also on at 1701BLERD. And Chrissy, where can people find you when you are not asking Albert Einstein about whether or not you're going to ignite the atmosphere with your latest equation?
You know what? If I had to do equations and have them not light up the atmosphere, we would be in some deep shit because I am not good at math.
You have a lot in common with Oppenheimer.
Yes. Anyway. Well, we talked about history with the Szilagyi, of course. That's the twice weekly short history podcast that Jay and I do together. You can also hear me on Infinite Diversity with co-host Hait and a different guest every week talking about new Trek as it comes out. I don't know when this is going to drop, but we got a season of Lower Decks coming, and it looks like it's going to be fantastic. And then I am, of course, happy to chat about the shows in the BQN Collective. I should be on Facebook more, but that's not something people usually say. I'm not on Facebook enough, right? I'm not in the collective enough, but certainly I am happy to talk about stuff there. And I am on the website formerly known as Twitter at the Goddess Livia. That's TheGoddessLivia. And I post, tweet, X, whatever about Star Trek history and leftist politics there. And I just set up a BlueSky account. I was sitting on the invite for a couple of weeks because of life. But I just set it up, and it's also the Goddess Livia there. Jay, so where can people find you when you are not acting as the military liaison for a science program that you really can't let them know too much about what's going on?
Well, you can find me also on History with Szilagyis. I am on Twitter, or X. I refuse to call it X, it's Twitter, at Jason Dark Elf, where I post about, Star Trek, Star Wars, Warhammer, science, archaeology, history. I just kind of bounce around different subjects.
You're a meme king.
Yes, I probably find way too many memes. I just like to make people laugh. I like to make people happy, even though it sounded really depressing in this episode.
Yeah. I'm going to speak for you here and say that if any listeners are interested in miniature painting, particularly Warhammer, because that's what he does, but I know I'm biased, but he does some of the most fantastic miniature painting I've ever seen. And you can see that on his Twitter feed and his Instagram.
Yes, thank you.
Awesome. That's really, I picked up, so I repainted some of my old Enterprise model kits during the pandemic. So I repainted my Enterprise D, my 1701C. I went wild. So respect, sir. I love it.
Thank you. Well, Mark, when you're not in a basketball stadium, being blinded by shiny lights and terrified by the sound of stomping feet, where can people find you?
There are 4 lights. No, wait, that's a different show. I'm not talking about Star Trek.
Don't forget, you've got to do the dramatic stumble. You have to do the dramatic theatrical stumble into your chair and then deliver the line.
Lights.
There it is.
There we go. Better?
Yeah.
When I'm not dramatically recreating Star Trek episodes, you can find me in the BQN Collective Facebook page. You can also find me on BlueSky at MW207. If you become a patron of the network on Patreon, you can hear my show It's Green, which jumps around and does a whole bunch of things within the podcast medium. Chrissy's been on there if you had a fun episode.
Yeah, that is a great show.
And I have another show that you guys might check out if you like Star Trek. It's called All Good Things, and we also pop around the Star Trek universe covering, well, all good things.
All good things.
Please hit the subscribe button on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get podcasts and leave us a star rating and written review. That helps others to find the show. You can also follow the entire network's podcast with our master feed by searching BQN.
At this time, we would like to thank our associate producer, Amy Nelson. A special thanks to Laz Marquez for our artwork each and every week. The opening and closing music for the podcast is titled Dancing Dead and was provided by Ketsa from the Free Music Archive, providing royalty-free music for content creators.
If you'd like to help us keep all of our shows coming to you each week, you can become a patron of the network on Patreon. We'll add you to the Hive Mind Facebook group right away, and you can enjoy It's Green, Amy's Math Moments, and the other patron-only and patron-early network perks. And with a monthly subscription of $5 or more, you can join our meetings at the Hive Mind on the second Saturday of each month. Watch your Patreon messages for details on that.
Thank you for listening.
We hope you'll tune in next time.
Humans are gonna human.
The past is the worst.
You stole the line from my show.
Wow. I think you guys figured out a closing faster than anybody else ever has.
It kind of lent itself from earlier. And literally, I'm wearing a shirt right now that says "The past was the worst." So, not to
Nice.
diminish your creativity.
No.
I'm not. Not at all.
Nicely done.
Nicely
Oh.
done.